Bringing you the top stories from Bonners Ferry to St. Mary's and everywhere in between. This is the North Idaho Prepcast with Ryan Scaggs.
That's right. It's another edition of the North Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com, breaking down everything in Districts 1 and 2 each and every week. Brandon Baney joined as always by Ryan Scaggs. How was your Thanksgiving, Ryan?
It was awesome. Yeah, a lot of turkey, and my favorite is the leftovers when you have like the hot turkey sandwich after 6 hours after dinner or whatever. That's probably my favorite meal of the Thanksgiving holiday, but it was pretty great. How was yours?
Yeah, it was good. I have a relative who is vegan, and so we had turkey and ham, but then he had also made a little plate of some like tofu ham, and I snuck a little corner piece and tried it. It was actually like really good.
Really?
I was surprised.
I would say like tofurkey or something like that totally sounds weird to me, and I don't know if I could pull that off.
The key is in the seasoning, I guess. You have to really season.
I don't have the vegan figure, so let's put it that way.
You're right. Yeah, and of course me, I'm svelte, so
yeah. Body built by beef.
Yeah. No doubt. So we took last week off because it was Thanksgiving, and we decided, this is a good time to take a break as the fall season came to an end, and we're getting ready for the winter sports season. And in that week off, Ryan, you really went at it. You put together an all-area team for football from this past season. Now, I should clarify that during the football season, this was a District 1 only podcast. So all these players you're going to see are from District 1. It's not that we don't think there weren't any good players in District 2, but we didn't really start covering District 2 until like today. So
yeah. So, and we might need to get Wayne to do a new intro for us just for that reason. But
yes, it's on my long list of things to do.
Don't want to add anything else to your list before Christmas. But it was a great season too. I mean, we had a ton of great athletes. The fans were amazing. The coaches were great. All the staff around, and from everybody giving you programs and everything else at every stadium you go to, and Sandpoint giving me an apartment up there so I could do like 6 consecutive games. I say that jokingly, of course. And following them through the state championship game, it was awesome. It was a ton of fun this year. Yeah,
Sandpoint fell just short to Skyline in the 4A championship. Kendrick. How about Kendrick?
Shout out to Coach Hobart. Yeah, his crew, man. I called it too. I called the upset, and I knew that team was destined for shock. And some people, they're young, but man, they've got athletes and they can run. And they showed it in the title game. I mean, congratulations to Coach Hobart and his team. He's got a great group of kids and a great staff around him too.
Yeah, a lot of sophomores and juniors for Kendrick, which as we transition to girls basketball talk a little bit later on in the Prepcast.
Yep.
Spoiler alert: the Kendrick girls basketball team
they're loaded. They're loaded.
They had a bunch of sophomores and juniors last year. So, good things going on at Kendrick right now as they defeated Cary in the 1A D2 state football championship game 2 weeks ago. So without further ado, Ryan, let's just dive in. We've got your teams locked and loaded, ready to go for the all area. This is the all District 1 football team selected solely by Ryan Scaggs. So if you have any complaints, no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, come see me. I'm sure I'll do an all left out team too.
Right.
But yeah, no, I think starting with quarterback, we had some great quarterback play in District 1 this year. So there's a couple kids that are left off the list that are solid, but I got Jackson Anderson from Post Falls, Ripley Luna from Kellogg, and Parker Pettit from Sandpoint, making that all district team for at least my choices and what I've seen this year. And they're all solid picks. I think you couldn't have gone wrong. You could have thrown in Bankston had a solid year at Coeur d'Alene too. But this one was pretty cut and dry. I think that these three were head and shoulders kind of above the rest as far as this year.
Yeah, each one was the best quarterback in their respective level, right? Jackson Anderson at the 5A, Parker Pettit at the 4A, Ripley Luna at the 3A. The exciting thing is that two of those guys are coming back next year, Ripley Luna and Parker Pettit.
And Parker Pettit's getting some looks too from D1 schools. So And he's going to get hopefully a healthy wide receiver crew back next year too. Because that playoff run he was working with a MASH unit out there and still pretty effective. But yeah, expect big things from both those kids next year. Great athletes, and they're definitely getting some looks and turning some heads.
For sure. I should mention that if you're watching the video version of this Prepcast on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel or our Facebook page, you'll see at the bottom of the screen, we've got all of his selections in text at the bottom of the screen. If you're listening to this audio only at IdahoSports.com or wherever you download your podcasts, I would recommend checking out the video just so you can see, because we're going to move through these kind of quickly, and there's at some positions there's a lot of guys. So.
Yeah, and it's just reason was like it's hard to leave some of these kids out, and so try to spread the wealth, obviously. So if we go to running back, I've got Gunnar Julio from Coeur d'Alene, Garrett Cox. I mean, that's a no-brainer. James Billingsley, Adam Ball from Mullen St. Regis, and then John Cornish from Lakeland. All different types of backs too. Every one of those is a different type of runner. So I think it's a good mix. Obviously throwing an 8-man guy in there and Adam Ball had a great year. But Garrett Cox, I mean, if we did an MVP for the district, I might pick him just based on the season that he had. Just a phenomenal year. And then he had to get involved in the passing game late in the year too. And he had a great year receiving out of the backfield. But I think the thing that gets overlooked with Garrett, just looking at him and kind of picking that apart, his ability to block. You see him pick up blitzes all the time in the passing game, and that he was kind of an unsung hero, I think, having that extra lineman out there, especially with some injuries and everything for Sandpoint late in the year. But Gunnar had a great year. Billingsley had a phenomenal. He even played some offensive line. I mean, the guy was kind of everywhere, but just a solid player. Just loves football. John Cornish is a kid I'm looking forward to seeing next year at Lakeland too. He's a speedster. He can burn. So we'll see what he can do. Not a real big kid, and then Adam Ball had a great year with Mullen. So congrats to those guys in my book, right? Like we said.
I think if you could take the top component of all 5 of these guys and combine it into one running back, you'd have like the best running back on the planet, right? You could take the receiving ability of Gunnar Julio, the blocking of Garrett Cox, the physicality and toughness of James Billingsley, the acceleration of Adam Ball, and then the flat out speed of John Cornish, right?
Yeah. I mean, he's the Flash. Let's put it though. That kid can. I mean, you saw it in the Skyline game yourself.
Yeah,
that kid can pull away from enemy. He'll pull away from a car. But yeah, so I'm right there with you. And Garrett had a tough year. Gunnar, Coeur d'Alene. Hopefully, we expected big things out of them. But I think that Cornish obviously being on that list, being the only one I think coming back next year. But hats off to that group. So we'll move on to wide receivers. This is another. I mean, dude, you look at this list. Zach Johnson from Lake City. Colby Luna from Kellogg had a great year. Thomas Calder from Lakeland, Carson Tucker from Post Falls, and I'm throwing in Vander Brown from Lakeside. Got overlooked this year. He had like video game numbers if you look at his touchdowns on the year. So I want to give a shout out to the Knight from Lakeside. Vander Brown had a great year out there, and Carson Tucker at Post Falls, just a solid all around receiver. Thomas Calder, another guy that just gets tough catches, tough yards. Colby Luna. Kellogg, the big play threat. Zach Johnson, the vertical threat, plus the size. I mean, he's a prototypical wide receiver. You can't really go wrong with that group.
Yeah, Zach Johnson from Lake City. He's going to get some looks, not just in football, but basketball. As well.
Yeah, that Lake City basketball team's going to be good this year too. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
We'll break that down. I'm thinking next week if we're going to talk about boys basketball. But we'll move on to tight end. Not really a deep list at tight end because not a lot of teams use them around here. But Devin Myers from Post Falls and Ari Vandenberg from Sandpoint, in my book, stood out. Just in their ability to be tough. They're gritty. Post Falls use them a little bit in a spread offense. Weirdly, Devin Myers kind of flexed out of the backfield, much like Vandenberg. But they both had solid years and worth being noted. So.
Let me ask real quick about this list you put together, because I look at tight end and I'm like, where is Cameron Cope from Coeur d'Alene? But I think you tried to only assign a guy to one position. Is that right?
I tried to. There was a couple that I had both sides of the ball, but not a ton.
Okay.
And Cope stood out more on defense than on offense, so that's where he went. So spoiler alert, Cameron Cope's on the defensive line.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Sorry I ruined that.
And then offensive line, Jackson Washington from Coeur d'Alene. I mean, you could say Coeur d'Alene offensive line, honestly, and nobody's going to argue with you. We kind of joked about that off air. But Jackson Washington and Wyatt Sanford stood out. Austin Portner from Post Falls had a great year up front, played really tough. Carson Laybourne and Wyland Durrell for Sandpoint stood out. I mean, physically, they stand out. Let's put it, they're big dudes, but they play really well, especially in that running game. I mean, that side of the line gets a push. And if you watch film and you see what they do, the pancakes that they get, it's pretty crazy. Possinger from Timberlake had a great year, and Bo Bateman from Bonners Ferry, had a great year as well. So shout out to those guys. They were on my all area team because you can't really go wrong with those picks. I think any one of those, they were all solid first team picks too for their conference. But they just stood out on film, and you watch high school football in North Idaho. They're kids that you'll see watching film. It's pretty easy to pick them out.
Yeah. A lot of good linemen up north. And I love it because they all end up going to the University of Montana, which is, I'm a big Montana Grizzly
There's a pipeline or something like that going on in Montana right now between them and Great Falls and everywhere else. They're ending up at Montana Tech too. So defensive line. So we'll go to the other side of the ball. Cameron Cope from Coeur d'Alene. So there he is. Spoiler alert. Nathan Crowell from Post Falls had a great year. The games that I had for Post Falls, I mean, I was calling his name all the time. Levi Ballison is actually a kid that I don't think got a lot of notoriety, but he was just a disruptor, man. He was out there just causing chaos. Like, if I could give a nickname, it would be Captain Chaos, because he just goes out there and he may not get the tackle, but he's blowing somebody up. He's, cutting a block. He might get a sack a game or a couple hurries or something like that, or a tackle for loss. But he's just one of those guys that kind of sneakily you have to keep tabs on because he's going to disrupt in the backfield. Brian Bell kind of the same way with Timberlake, had a great year. And then Trevor Miller from Post Falls was another great player. So shout out to those guys up front.
Yeah, I did the Post Falls Rigby game back in September, and Trevor Miller had an impact.
He's a dude
all over.
Yeah, he's a dude. And so he had a great year. So it's pretty hard to leave any of those guys off the list. This next group might be one of the best groups in the state of Idaho. Honestly, I don't know. I mean, you could throw any other group, but this is pretty outstanding. You got Wes Benefield, triple-digit tackles. Jake Woolley from Coeur d'Alene, much the same. Bridger Stevens from Lake City, Connor Moore at Lakeland, Cade Pasley at Timberlake, and Cole Cripps from Post Falls. That crew, that is a studly group of dudes at linebacker that they turned heads statewide. And I don't know if the all-state teams have come out yet. I don't think I've seen them. But Benefield, in my mind, he's a first-team all-state linebacker. Same with Woolley, and I would throw Cripps out there too. Cripps had a great year for Post Falls. Another one of those guys that just jumps out when you watch games. He's everywhere, and kind of quietly. I mean, he'll get tackles, downfield. He'll get tackles in the backfield. But just a great year by all those guys. So. Congrats to them for having a great season.
Yeah, I'm glad you included Bridger Stevens from Lake City, because Lake City didn't get a ton of acclaim or attention this year, and he
had a great year, and he's a good player too. He's a really good player. So yeah, I couldn't leave him off the list. He's another one of those players that he stood out. So
yes.
This DB group, much the same. You can't go wrong. I mean, you got Isaiah Griffin, Josiah Weaver, Zach Clark, and Chase Berg on the back end of that one from the 5A ranks. Those are all, in my mind, all-state DBs. I mean, they're either first or second teamers. Pretty easy to argue for that. And then throw in Jack Zimmerman, Luke McCorkle, either one of those guys. I mean, they had gaudy numbers too in tackles and INTs. For Sandpoint, Colby Luna had a great year on the defensive side of the ball. And then Raj Oliveri from Timberlake had a great season as well. So that's a great group too, that, if we did like a North versus South game defensively, the North is, dude, that's a tough group. That is a really tough group.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of these guys were asked to take on a lot offensively this year too. Isaiah Griffin had to play receiver. Josiah Weaver played quarterback a little bit for Lake City. Zach Clark was a receiver for Post Falls. Colby Luna, of course, was the best receiver for Kellogg. So the fact that these guys were doing it both ways is
McCorkle was playing wide receiver in the playoffs. I mean, it's no days off for those guys. They're pulling double duty. So
yeah.
And then on the special teams side, to kind of round things off, kicker, he stood out. He's a dude. Lasse Kuhn, the German foreign exchange student at Sandpoint, has got an absolute howitzer of a leg. And so he head and shoulders the cream of the crop for kickers in North Idaho. Joe Borges from Timberlake had a great year punting. He was their all-conference punter. Great year. And then returners, Gunnar Julio and Tanner Sessions. Sessions quietly had a really great year returning, and he was a threat. And I know had a couple TDs in the middle part of the season against some of those Washington schools. He really stood out. So I think he got overlooked a little bit, but he was lethal in the return game, just with his speed. So those are my returners. And then I guess I don't know if you have anything to add with those guys, because you did see Sessions and a few of those guys this year too. But
yes, Julio to me is kind of a no-brainer, right?
Yeah.
Such game-breaking ability. He was just hampered by injuries like all season long. They just nagged at him, and so
it was like a wrist and an elbow, and he had like a pulled muscle in his leg, and he was just, and he showed up every week.
Yes,
did what he was asked to do.
I hope he has time to heal up a little bit and get ready for wrestling, because he is going for the very rare 4-time state championship club in wrestling, which would be awesome. So
yeah, and that's super hard. And we'll do a little wrestling breakdown, I think, next week too, because there's some dudes up here in North Idaho worth recognizing. And I say dudes, I'm saying like they are national caliber quality guys that are up here. So yeah, I'll give a shout out to Rogers later, but
yes,
Coeur d'Alene's got some guys this year that are crazy good. So
yeah.
And then coach of the year, Ryan Knowles from Sandpoint, did a great job with his crew. And I think that's worth recognizing. I mean, we talk about the kids and stuff too, but the coaches need a lot of kudos and attaboys. And just one thing I'll say about North Idaho is that we just got good guys up here. I mean, they're coaches that really care about their kids and their community, and it reflects with the support that all these programs get. I mean, you can look at some of these teams that don't really have a ton of success, like Priest River, but their coaches are still just good people that, it's really hard not to root for some of these programs. And Priest River going down next year, I'm looking forward to see what they can do at a more level playing field with going 2A, with a lot of the kids they have coming back. I know that they were left off this list, but, looking forward to 2022, I guess, as we're running, in football. It's going to be an exciting year next year. I think the level of play in Idaho, like you look, because Idaho, you kind of compare to our neighbor in Washington. Idaho blew Washington out of the water as far as competition this year. It wasn't even close. And I expect much the same next year. Sandpoint could be back in the title game. Coeur d'Alene's going to be back too. I mean, I think that they're just going to reload. Lake City could be a little bit better next year. Post Falls is going to be pretty solid. Lewiston could get better too. They got some guys coming back too on their side. So, talking about some of the District 2 teams, Moscow's going to be up. They were super young this year. So it'll be interesting to see how things play out next year. I think next year might be the year that Kellogg might take the league. We'll see. I mean, they got some guys coming back, so they'll finally, maybe they can dethrone Timberlake, and Bonners Ferry might have something to say about that too, because they were young also. So it's going to be a good year next year.
Yeah, it's a fun race to watch. And then, Mullen St. Regis loses some guys, but they're going to be just fine. That new league where they're taking in Wallace and Lakeside, that's going to be so much fun to watch at the 1A D2 level as well. So, and then of course, in District 2, the White Pine League, Prairie, Lapway, Genesee. I mean, there's so many.
It's going to be awesome. Yeah. And, so I don't want to look too far forward, but I definitely see a couple of state champs coming back out of North Idaho again next year.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, Ryan. Well, let's transition to girls basketball. This will be kind of our quasi girls basketball preview, even though there's most teams are a couple games in the season. Although up north, because down in districts 3, 4, 5, 6, a lot of teams start middle of November. A lot of schools have played 5 games already. What is it like in terms of scheduling up north?
So it's a little bit of a nightmare up here. I mean, because you're waiting, either you're playing another Idaho school, but Washington's a week behind. And so, you really start to try to get to your schedule. You're kind of in a holding pattern through Thanksgiving, wait until those Washington schools open up. And so, because they want to play non-league opponents, they don't want to jump straight into their league schedule. So it's kind of interesting, but in girls basketball, I mean, you see the Coeur d'Alene schools are playing some of the Meridian schools. So you're getting some of the West Ada teams coming up this week. I mean, you'll see I believe it's next week, I believe. Rockies coming up, Meridian, and I think Eagles on their way up here too. So you kind of got a schedule around that. I mean, you'll see a couple 5A teams maybe playing a 3A school. That's just the way it has to be. And that's no knock to the 3A teams because there's some quality programs there between Timberlake and Kellogg. But that's just kind of, you got to do what you got to do to play some games before everybody's finally able to get going.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, let's talk about, let's start with that 5A conversation. Coeur d'Alene has been the premier program. Coach Nicole Simmons has put together a great program year in, year out, and the Vikings look like the favorite again up north.
Yeah, I mean, they've got Maddie Simmons coming back. She's an all-state player, as well as Skylar Burke. So between the two of them, I mean, that's just, a two-headed monster that they've got. And they got the train running. I mean, they've got great players coming in too, following them behind between, Aubrey, Mitchell, even Lily Fenice, like coming in, that there's some solid players on that squad that, they made a run last year. I think they took 4th at state. It wouldn't surprise me if they're playing on Saturday again this year, and maybe playing in the Idaho Center. It wouldn't surprise me one bit to see them in the title game with what they've got coming back between, Simmons and Burke. They're two of the premier players in the state of Idaho.
I will note that Lake City already is off to a 4-0 start, including 2-0 in the league. So again, this year, Ryan, they're doing the combined 5A, 4A Inland Empire League, where obviously if you're a 5A school like Coeur d'Alene, all the games against the other 5A teams count as conference games. And then it is the home games against the 4A schools. So they beat Moscow 45-14. That counts as a league win.
Could have told me that was the football score.
Right.
Sorry.
Yes. And it's the opposite for the boys. When the 5A schools travel to the 4A schools, that is the league game. In boys basketball. So a little confusing at first. I would say continue to take a look at the scores and the standings at IdahoSports.com so you have all of the most accurate information.
Yeah. And then, I mean, so Coeur d'Alene looks to be the favorite in that 5A. I don't know. I think it's deceiving that, everybody's picking Lake City to finish second. I've got Post Falls. I think Post Falls is a team that could surprise some people. They've got a couple players coming back. But if you look at Lake City, they went 13-7 last year. They've got Pickford, Zufelt, Reynolds coming back. They're experienced players. They're solid players. But Post Falls, I mean, they won a state title in 2018. They qualified for state last year. But they've got Lexi Heath is back from injury. She didn't even play last year. She was one of their better players. They've got Sims, Crane, Christensen. I mean, that's a deep bench. Nichols and Magnuson there too. So the Trojans, I think, might surprise some people. I think they'll get to state again this year. I really do. And I don't think they're going to win the league outright. Coeur d'Alene's just really good, but they might shock the Vikings and maybe steal a game this year. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. And then Lewiston, they're still building that program. They had a rough year last year. But they've got, a couple solid players coming back with Collins and Ortiz and Wessels and Urin. But it's going to be an interesting conference on the 5A side. I think the 4A is much the same, but it's deep. I mean, obviously you don't have the standout players that, that Lake City had last year that's now playing at Michigan State. But, you still got between Coeur d'Alene and Post Falls. I mean, you've got some really, really quality players there in the conference. So it's going to be deep once again.
Yeah. Let's shift now to that 4A portion of the Inland Empire League. And we sent out these preseason forms to all of the coaches and kind of asked them like, hey, who do you think is going to be good? Where do you think your team will stack in? How do you think it's going to go? And we just got like a big, like, I don't know.
That's kind of a shrug, like, draw a straw. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think between the 3-4A teams, I mean, Sandpoint, they lost last year in the state semis. They got hot late, but they graduated a lot of that, scoring threat that they had last year. Their top scorers are all gone. They do get Cessna back. Driggs is back and Platt. So they're going to be decent there. But I don't know. Lakeland's got some really good players. Addie Kiefer, is one of the better players in the conference. She's I think going to lead those Lady Hawks. But if you look at, and I think it's like 1A and 1B, Sandpoint and Lakeland. Moscow, I think, has too tall of a hill to climb this year. They're still building, and they were so young last year. They're still young this year. But I know that group is, the Bears are, hoping to be shockers like they were in soccer, like maybe play spoiler and sneak in the district tournament. But Lakeland and Sandpoint last year split. They went 2-2, differentiation of 5 points between those games. So, I mean, you talk about being evenly matched. That doesn't get much different, get that close. So between Kiefer, Sterling, Simon, and then Lila Kiefer is going to play too for the Hawks. So should be a pretty solid group for Lakeland. I think that they're going to get the bid to state this year. That's my pick. But it wouldn't surprise me if Sandpoint steps up and has something to say about that too.
Well, I would say, Ryan, don't sleep on Moscow, and here's why. They've got a really good coach. That's really, I mean, she's very dynamic, and I don't know if you know her background at all, but her name is Alexa Hardick. Yeah, she's from like Dallas, Texas originally, played at Bishop Lynch High School down in Dallas, played collegiately at the University of San Francisco. That's a West Coast Conference school that plays Gonzaga, Pepperdine, etc. Played 4 years for the Dons of San Francisco, and then was an assistant coach at the college level as well before taking the job in Moscow a year ago. So I think she's a really young, dynamic coach, and I'm going to be very interested to see how she brings this Moscow program.
And I'll add this too. Moscow plays great defense. I mean, they only had one team score over 50 points on them last year, and that was Lapway. So, don't count out the Bears. Obviously, if you're going to play good defense, you're going to be in ball games. But you got offensively, I mean, like you look at that Coeur d'Alene score. I know that they're playing, a 5A opponent, but you got to get more than 14 points to put yourself in ball games. So, if they can get the scoring side of things figured out, and with that defense, to match, they could pull some games. I think that 500 or better, or close to that mark isn't out of the question for the Bears. I think they're going to get some league wins. They might steal a couple or steal one from Sandpoint and Lakeland. I think they'll get Lewiston this year. So it'll be. I mean, that league's tough though. If you look at that 4A 5A combo, that's a tough conference. So coming out of there unscathed is going to be pretty difficult.
Yeah, let's move to the Intermountain League, the 3A level. Timberlake,
Texas, and Timberlake basketball.
Yeah. But here's the thing: Timberlake has dominated this league for a long time, long time. But in the preseason coaches poll, Kellogg was picked to finish first, and kind of like we saw in football, a slow changing of the guard, maybe. But this Kellogg team is loaded.
Yeah, they're deep. And they've got 6 returning players from last year that all saw significant playing time. They're gonna be tough to mess with, I think, down the stretch with that type of experience on the team. I mean, Timberlake, they lost 7 seniors off the team that, they won back-to-back state championships, and they haven't lost a league game since 2014. So that is of note. That's something you got to look at. That's a pretty glaring stat. That's a system and so, I mean, you may have new players coming in, but there's a tradition that's built there. I don't think Timberlake's going to be willing to give that up just yet, but Kellogg for sure, I think, is going to make a push. Bonners Ferry is going to be a sneaky team too, in my opinion, just with the amount of girls they've got coming back on their roster, especially the way they can score. So they're gonna make it interesting.
Yeah, and then I will mention Priest River as well. A couple of cool things going on there. Gary Stewart is the head coach. He's been there for a while. His assistant coach is his daughter, Morgan Douglas, and she was a member of the 2010 state championship squad at Priest River High.
That's a pretty cool story. And so you're rooting for the Lady Spartans there to bring some of that tradition back, that maybe there's a little bit of magic with having the state championship coach and or assistant, coach and assistant. So as a player, but they've got, Freitas and Pound there that can play too. So Kellogg's bench, though, I think that's going to be the story of the league this year in the IML. How it's going to be tough for any of those other 3 teams to overcome that with that experience. But Timberlake, like I said, they've got the tradition and the history. Their coaching staff is phenomenal. So it'll be interesting to see how things shake up and if there's a changing of the guard in that conference.
Yeah, and now if we go to the 2A, the Central Idaho League, Grangeville, heavy favorite and deservedly so.
Yeah, that team is loaded again. I mean, they've got, a gaudy all-state player in Camden Barger, and she's good. And so or Barger, and that's that team with Vanderwall, Brown, Smith around her. They played in the third place game last year. I wouldn't be surprised that team's going to the state championship game this year. They're good. That Bulldog team is really good. St. Mary's returns no starters. I mean, that's just they're young, and they're still really young this year. And then Orfino, I mean, Schwartz and Bearden and Zenner, and Mary, they're pretty solid players there too. But you look at that heavy favorite Grangeville and you talk about them, and that's one of those teams that historically has just been there every year, and year after year after year. That AAU program is tough, and it just feeds that high school team, and they just keep things rolling.
Yeah, and they put together a pretty challenging schedule. They're 3-1 to start. They already have wins over New Plymouth, McCall Donnelly, which is a 3A school, and Parma, which is a really good 3A school. They beat Parma 46-44.
Yeah, so they got things moving in the right direction early already. Yeah,
and their only loss is to the defending 2A state champion Melba, and they only lost that game 33-27. So that's what, a 5-point difference.
Yeah,
6-point difference.
Yeah, you can see that game happening again on Saturday afternoon in February. So
yes.
Yeah, pretty easily. But yeah, that conference, the Grangeville's the bell cow, that conference. But it'll be I think the playoffs, the state tournament's going to be the goal. It's kind of a state championship. Otherwise, I don't really know if they accomplished their goal for the year.
Right.
Just based on what they have returning.
Definitely. 1A D1 level. Let's start with the White Pine League because they're going to get 2.5 teams to state. The Scenic Idaho Conference gets half a team. So whoever wins that league has to play third place from the White Pine League. We talked about this during volleyball. You and I agree. Not really fair, but it is what it is. And the coaches know that.
Yeah, and I think that if you look at it in basketball, the competitive balance would indicate that it's fairly fair, I think. But that 1A D1 White Pine League, you look at just the names there alone in recognition of what you have returning and the teams that have been there historically. Between Lapway, Prairie is a powerhouse. Genesee's always been, there. Off and on years, you'll see Cammy and Troy make appearances and make late runs, in the state tournament. So, but this year, I think it's Lapway's league to lose, in my opinion. And I mean, that Lady Wildcats team is solid. They've got a lot of girls coming back and a lot of, they in Sakis Green that she didn't even play last year. And then, so she's going to be playing this year. And I mean, so they got deeper, what was already a deep team. It's kind of not really fair in my opinion, but I mean, like, that's just, the rich get richer. It's going to be Prairie and Lapway, I think, making the push, with Prairie returning a bunch of starters too. So I wouldn't count out the Pirates at all, but that White Pine League is going to be, I think the state championship definitely comes from that conference this year.
Yeah, Lapway, Prairie, you mentioned Genesee, a team that is getting a lot of buzz from a lot of opposing coaches and was actually picked to finish third in the preseason coaches poll is Cammy.
Yeah, Cammy, I think, is going to be sneaky good. They've got some great athletes on that team, and they can shoot and defend. I mean, you can do both those things. You're going to put yourself in a position to win some ball games, and the Cubs are on the right track. As far as, putting things, I think, so you look at them and how do they match up against like a Lakeside Wallace or Genesis Prep? I would give the advantage to Cammy now this early in the year. I don't know about later in the season, but Lakeside's got a decent squad coming back too. So it'll be interesting to see how things kind of shake out in the White Pine, at least behind Lapway and Prairie. I think that you could basically draw straws from them to Potlatch. Between Cammy, Genesee, Troy, Clearwater Valley, or Potlatch, any of those three teams could make, a state tournament appearance, and it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, the always unpredictable White Pine League. The Scenic Idaho Conference, you mentioned it, Lakeside, probably the favorite. Wallace, I don't think, is too far behind, and then Genesis Prep is still building.
Genesis Prep is super young. They were young last year. They're still young this year. But they're going to get better. I think that, I don't see them going over like they did last year, but They've got, get the Jags moving in the right direction. Wallace, I think, is getting closer. They're closing that gap with Lakeside. If they split this year in the series, I mean, it comes down to the district championship game. That wouldn't surprise me one bit. That conference ends up in a dead heat most of the year. Wallace has got some girls. Brittany Phillips coming back. She's a solid player. But Lakeside returning the Holt sisters, and then Javier Gore, that lineup. Those three players are pretty dang solid to have in your front and back court. So it'll be interesting to see what the Knights can do this year. They were 12-9 last year. Maybe if they get in, I think that they can make a run to getting a state bid. I know they only get the half bid, so that play-in game kind of is pretty telling. But how do they compare? I say a draw at this point. We'll see what happens, in February.
Right. And Wallace off to a 3-1 start so far this year. That's obviously pretty good.
Yeah.
1A D2. Again, let's start with the White Pine League, because they're the team that's going to get, 1.5 teams to state. And
sure.
then the winner of the North Star League only gets the half bid, where they have to play the second place team from the White Pine League.
Yep.
And this is a league I know well, because I just wrote the preview for this last night on IdahoSports.com, Ryan. So I am prepared to tell you. You didn't need me to tell you this, but Kendrick is really good.
Kendrick's really good. I don't know what's in the water in Kendrick, but they're doing something right, because we saw them win the state football championship, and don't be surprised if the girls basketball team's not far behind this year. They got second last year in 2020. I think they're the favorite to win it this year. Just based on what they return. Morgan, Stacy, Haley Taylor, Hannah Tweet, that team is loaded with talent, especially for a small school. They've got girls that'll play at the 5A level that can shoot it. So it'll be interesting. How does it go behind them? Nez Perce, I think the coaches got it right in picking it. Nez Perce at number 2, I think is a pretty safe pick. Catherine Duck's a solid player. She's pretty darn good. So how does it work with, the 1A D2 ranks? I mean, Mullen doesn't even have a team this year. So you look at between Kootenai and Clark Fork. Clark Fork only won 2 games last year. The 1A D2 White Pine, they're getting, in my opinion, they're getting the bids. They're going to steal them. I think that conference is just stronger. Nothing against Kootenai or Clark Fork, but there's just a little more depth down there on the Camas Prairie. And don't be surprised Deary makes a run. I think that the Mustangs could be pretty good too. So, they've got a couple good players and some notable names. You got Kennedy Kirk. I don't know if you recognize that name, but in North Idaho basketball, that resonates a little bit. So there's some players coming out of that area too on the Palouse. So.
Yeah. Mullen won the North Star League last year. First time they'd been to state since 1986. I know they were super excited for it. They just didn't have enough players, they thought, to have a varsity team. So JV only schedule, and hopefully we can see Mullen back. They won't get to defend their conference title.
Nope.
It's a bummer.
Yeah, so we'll see a new league champ up in the North Star, but I mean, a 2-team conference, and I know things are changing next year. At least in the football front, but for basketball, hopefully Mullen gets back to a 3-team conference and can kind of add to that competitive balance next year.
Yeah, definitely. Kendrick, I don't know if you've seen the schedule they put together, Ryan. They played St. Mary's. That's 2 levels up, and they 54-14.
That Lady Tigers team, they are legit. So, I think that they would they'd make noise against some 4A teams. Honestly, I mean, if you're going to be playing St. Mary's, they could step up and play against anybody. I mean, that Kendrick Tigers team is really good. I'd love to see that game with them and Lapway. But
here's the games on the schedule that you're going to want to keep an eye on. December 17th, they host Grangeville. That's going to be a good game.
That's going to be, and that gym will be full. That gym will be packed.
And then a week after that, they are going to Orlando, Florida to compete in a big national tournament in Orlando.
Can we get IdahoSports.com to go do that game and send me that direction? I'll gladly take that trip in winter. Get Paul on the horn for some more sponsors.
Yeah, no doubt. Hey, if you can get it sponsored, let's do it. I mean,
yeah, I'll have you be my color commentator. We're in.
Let's do it. They're going to be in Orlando for 3 days. And that's going to be fantastic competition for them. I got to see Kendrick at state last year. I did the 1A D2 girls state basketball tournament, and they came in with no respect. Like always, right? Teams from the North
Rodney
don't get
Dangerfield. Yeah, we're the Rodney Dangerfield district up here.
They played Carey in the semifinals, and everybody thought Carey was just going to steamroll. Okay, Kendrick got a first round win. That's nice. Okay, now Carey's going to show, we're the real team. And Kendrick, I mean, really led that game from start to finish. Carey never really was in it. And then they almost beat Tri-Valley in the championship. I think they were just a year away. They had freshmen, sophomores, and juniors that are now sophomores, juniors, and seniors. I think Kendrick is not only the favorite in the White Pine League, I think they're the 1A D2 state title favorite as well.
Absolutely. I would totally, completely agree. And like I said, something in the water down there is paying dividends right now in athletics in Kendrick.
Yeah, and I was at the same hotel as the Kendrick team last year, so I got to talk to head coach Ron Ireland quite a bit over the 3 days we were in Boise together. He's just a cool dude too. He's awesome.
No, I've got some family from there, and no, there's just great people. I mean, you get to know a lot of the families and stuff. The more you follow sports and being a broadcaster, I get, parents sitting in front of me at games, and during timeouts, they'll talk to me and stuff. And it's just cool getting to know some of the backstories. And, when you're setting up for pregame and somebody comes up and introduces himself to you, and it's like, hi, I'm so-and-so's dad. And you're like, sweet, nice to meet you. Like, tell me something interesting about your kid. Like, let me embarrass him, like, or something like that, and it's just a ton of fun. And I only expect that to grow the more we get to do this in North Idaho, just because there's so many great communities and great families up here.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. One more story to keep an eye on in girls basketball up north. For the first time in over 3 years, I think it was 3 seasons, St. John Bosco is going to have a girls varsity team. Alyssa Fry is going to be the coach, and she said, honestly, the last couple of years I've been an assistant on the boys team, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. So, and I know that they got a transfer from Prairie that they're high on too. So, in Jade Prigge. So we'll see how they do, and maybe they'll make some noise too. With finally fielding that roster. I know that in past that that league can get crazy. You get to the tournament time and in the activity center at LCSC, anything can happen there. You've had some buzzer beaters and photo finishes in those games last 10, 15 years. So it's always fun once those games get to Lewiston, because it's got that state tournament feel. But for a district tournament, it's one of the cooler venues.
Yep, it's going to be a lot of fun. So, yeah, that's our girls basketball preview. Next week, we'll kind of recap what we saw in girls basketball from the past week to start, and then we'll dive into the boys basketball preview.
Yeah, we've already had some boys results up here. We had some games yesterday. So
yes,
Lake City beat Mount Spokane, so that was a good win for the T-Wolves.
Spoiler alert, Lake City. Yeah, they're going to be really good.
They're really good. They're really good. So
yeah.
We'll be talking about them quite a bit this winter.
Yes, all of our girls basketball previews are up on our website, IdahoSports.com, and we are working on the boys basketball previews as we speak. So if you don't see your favorite team yet, keep checking back over the next couple of days. Hopefully by next Monday, we've got all the teams for boys basketball up on the site. So it's a good time of year.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. It's a fun. Then I like the transition too. You get that kind of that week break from Thanksgiving, and then you hold your breath and buckle up, because it's going to get crazy from now until March.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. So
a lot of fun.
Yep. Thanks for tuning into the North Idaho Prepcast. For Ryan Scaggs, I'm Brandon Baney. Enjoy the games this week, everybody, and we'll see you back here next week on another edition of the North Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.